Okay, good morning and welcome to the second day of PuppetConf. Before we get started and handing over to Martin, we've got a special guest. So I'll hand you over to Sam Adams, who's the Mayor of Portland.
Well, thank you. We are incredibly proud to be the home of Puppet Labs. I want to thank and congratulate Luke and Jose and the rest of the team at Puppet Labs. Congratulations on Puppet Enterprise 2.0. This is a company that is leading the way in innovation, not only in its core area of expertise, but it's also helping us here in the city of Portland and the Portland region in Oregon to grow one of our 4 targeted industries, which is software and digital development. And what you will find in this region is a software and digital development industry that is second to none in terms of its depth of talent, in terms of its breadth of expertise, its ability to be nimble, its ability to be strategic, and to provide its clients the kind of innovation and creativity that cannot be matched for an industry of our size, I believe, anywhere in the world. When I say that software is one of our target industries, also called cluster industries, it means that we do everything we can to support it. We have a huge number of people that work in the city of Portland for companies that are far away, in addition to the companies that we have here. In the last 2 years, since we created this target industry of software and digital development, we have seen not only a lot of local growth of existing companies, but new companies that have chosen to locate here. And some of the biggest companies, whether it's Intel or IBM or Google, to also launch new products here. The fact that Intel has one of its largest research and development facilities, and they're in a process of a multi-billion-dollar expansion, yes, that helps, but it is only the core of our total capabilities here. It's also because of the great talent that we have here in the software and digital development industry, we've also worked to become the leader in Government 2.0, and whether that's civic apps, whether that's one of the only publicly, municipally started seed startup funds that I put $500,000 of city resources in. We matched it with another almost $2.5 million, and we selected 8 firms to fund in our first tranche, and I put another $500,000 in this year, and we're going to get it matched by another $2.5 million. Government 2.0 is about not only for us, accessing and promoting the social connections to the benefit of governance, to the benefit of inclusion, but it's also government and the private sector working together to grow this great industry. It's showing. We had $70 million in venture capital funding in this area in the last year. For us, we believe that is a record. So we're on a good hot streak, and Puppet Labs and all of you working with and customers of and developers in partnership with Puppet Labs helps us make that happen. We also happen to be a place of great talent in a city that you would actually want to live in, and that's a key part of our attraction, our ability to keep talent, whether it's Ward Cunningham or others that have been great innovators. They stay involved in the life of the industry, but they also stay involved in making sure that this is a place that talent wants to live. And talent is, and the ability to attract and keep talent is one of our competitive advantages. So we're really glad that you're here. How many of you are from out of town? Raise your hand. Okay. This is an open invitation to move your company here. I'll wait by the door. No, seriously, I am serious. This is an open invitation to open an office here, to commute from here to your company, to move your company here, we think we have something very special to offer on both the industrial, on the commercial, on the corporate side, the entrepreneurial side, but we also offer a great place for families. And in terms of enjoyment, I really hope that you find time to get out and enjoy one of our 36 breweries, one of our 8 distilleries, some of the best Pinot wine that you will find in the world in the counties that surround this city. We're obsessed also with coffee. This is the home of Stumptown, which is the best coffee in the United States. And I'm not just saying that because I'm mayor. Go try it. It's really good stuff. Now, there's a lot going on today, but because I just want to underscore my love for this industry, we've got a square dancing festival at the convention center. I think we've got a plant show up at the exhibition hall, but because of the importance and love and affection that I have for your industry, if you're from out of town and you go shopping, you go to partake in some of our great food in addition to our beverages, just show them your tag and tell them that the mayor said you don't have to pay a sales tax because you're here for the Puppet Conference. Have a great conference. Thank you. Thank you, Puppet Labs.
Okay, now we're back to the published schedule. So I'll hand you over to Marten Mickos, who's come all the way from Eucalyptus Systems.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I feel like moving to Portland after that fantastic speech by the mayor. So a very warm welcome, and thank you for inviting me here. So my name is Marten Mickos. I'm the CEO of Eucalyptus Systems. We produce and provide a private cloud software platform. And before this, I was the CEO of MySQL, a database you may know of, from 2001 to 2009. Which means, of course, that I'm a little bit more of a dev guy, and you represent operations. And I think what's common for us is open source, and also think that cloud is something which is common, because that's where the application side and the operation side finally need to get together. And I know it's not always easy, and sometimes there are difficulties in communication, because the developer guys, they just develop applications and then they hand it over to operations and assume everything will work. And the operations guys get all the blame when it doesn't. So I realize that there's some work to be done there to coordinate it better. And I do think that cloud is a path to getting there, and that's what this presentation will be about. But let's first start by just asking, how many of you are AWS users, Amazon Web Services? That's like 60%. And how many of you have heard of Eucalyptus? Excellent, even more, wonderful. And how many use Eucalyptus? Great, even more people. Exactly, you might know it even if you don't know. So if you go to puma.com, it's running on Eucalyptus. We also eat our own dog food or drink our own champagne, as we like to say it. So if you go to eucalyptus.com, it also runs on Eucalyptus. But let's get going here. So I'm here to talk about open source and cloud computing, private clouds, and at the end we'll have a quick session of all questions and answers, where you can ask anything that I did cover in the presentation and about things I didn't cover, if you're interested. So I usually start by reminding people that there are very fundamental changes on this planet that drive the shift to cloud computing. Because there's sort of the egocentric way of looking at saying, we technical people, we love new technology, so we'll go cloud whether it's needed or not. But there's also an underlying thing, which is in this modern world, we have so many new connected devices with an IP address that have unpredictable, variable workloads and needs that they need from a server somewhere. And the only way to serve that need is through cloud computing. Today we have 5, 6, maybe 7 billion connected devices, and people are predicting that in just a matter of years it will grow to 1 trillion. When we have medical devices, gas meters, electricity meters, vehicles, homes, everything will have an IP address, gaming consoles, everything. And they will all need to be served by something. And that something is cloud. It's a public cloud, it's a private cloud, it's a hybrid cloud, it's a virtual private cloud. We'll need all kinds of clouds to serve them, because there's no other way. We can't have dedicated servers anymore for every application. We must have a cloud that is deployed where it's needed at that very moment. Many of us now have internet connectivity in our cars, but those cars, the usage of the cars follows certain patterns and is unpredictable and variable. So it doesn't make sense to have servers waiting there all the time. Instead, you have a cloud ready to serve whichever device will need you at that point. So even if we who are deep in the software infrastructure, even if we never see those connected devices, at the end of the day, I believe that's what's driving the big shift to cloud computing. There's also a shift of old legacy applications that are being moved into cloud. But I think in the grand scheme of things, that's actually smaller than all the new stuff being built, all the greenfield opportunities. And when this happens, this stuff, whatever it is, the whole connectivity from the connected device back to the back end needs to be managed and configured and orchestrated. And that's, in my view, where products and projects like Puppet come in. We need increasingly to manage them and manage them at scale and manage them efficiently. And I can see it becoming a huge business for a company like Puppet to build out and go up the stack and start managing not just the systems deep down, but also the applications and the data and the whole environment, which will be increasingly interconnected. Because with cloud computing, the benefit is that we can move workloads and we have all the flexibility and elasticity. But there are no benefits that come without some unintended side effects and unintended consequences. And what we'll have is, of course, when everything is connected to everything, it means that configuring it and managing it is much more complicated. Just a concrete example is 10 years ago when I joined MySQL, it was all about the Linux distro. And we needed to get into Red Hat and SUSE, and that's how how MySQL became popular and became the M of the lamp stack. So there was a handful of distros we needed to work with. Today, you have thousands, if not tens of thousands of different images on the cloud, combinations of a Linux distro, some other middleware, some other software, you tailor it, you use templates, and the universe of the stuff that used to be distros is now much bigger because there's much more variability and much more customization for specific needs. So the world is changing, and we need to configure it efficiently, otherwise we'll just drown in the multitude of different pieces of software that need to work with each other at different times. So that's why we started Eucalyptus. And of course, you all know what it stands for. Elastic Utility Computing Architecture, linking your programs to useful systems. So now I don't need to tell you that it was a research project at UC Santa Barbara because you know it. Only 6 PhDs could come up with such an explanation. But there's some truth here. We say linking your programs to useful systems. And this is exactly this connection of dev with ops, that we are linking programs, we are linking the applications to the systems. And that has to be managed. And it has to be managed from both sides. And I think there's more learning for the dev guys to do, to recognize and acknowledge the operations guys. But whichever side has more homework to do, we need to coordinate that work because we are launching so many programs on so many systems and they are shifting back and forth. And it's only by scripting it, automating it, that we can practically handle it. Maybe you're running some small prototypes now which feel manageable, but once you get into big volume, big numbers of users, it's unmanageable unless you've automated it ahead of time. So just quickly, you indicated that all of you know Eucalyptus, so maybe there's nothing new here. But Eucalyptus is open source software. It's a GPL project that the company Eucalyptus Systems develops. We started in Santa Barbara, California. We're now all over the world. It is the most widely deployed private cloud software platform. In the year 2010, we detected 25,000 Eucalyptus clouds starting up all over the world. And there were more. These were the ones who voluntarily let us know that they had installed and got going. And the very quick description of what our software does is, if you can imagine AWS, Amazon Web Services, and the cloud you have there, EC2, S3, and EBS, we do the exact same thing, but on your own servers. So if you would like to run a cloud of your own, on your own hardware, then you take our software, install it on your servers, and you have a cloud. You have an IaaS cloud. And this can be a little bit counterintuitive to some, because we've just learned and agreed that cloud is about getting rid of hardware and everything is running out in the cloud and all you need to do is launch your applications. Well, it turns out there's still a big need for running smaller clouds, protected clouds, private clouds, whatever you call them, on-premise clouds. And that's what the Eucalyptus software is about. It's a new software category, of course, so it occupies a new area, a new place in the software stack. It takes a new chunk of your purchasing budget because previously there were no cloud platforms. Previously, you had servers with dedicated workloads. And still today, if you go into a big company to the data center, they will say, here are the servers for our website, here are the servers for our S3, IBM, getting confused here with my SAP R3 installation, here is our accounting system running. But with a cloud platform, you can move those workloads back and forth. So you need something like Eucalyptus. And Eucalyptus makes use of virtualization. So virtualization is the first step you take where you divide your servers into smaller pieces. And then with a platform like Eucalyptus, you can combine them and provide them to whoever needs them at that point. So that's what our software does. Some of our users up here on the right-hand side, Plinga is the leading social gaming site in Europe. They launch their games on Amazon, but when the workload settles, they move them back in to run on a Eucalyptus cloud for a number of reasons of their own. USDA has a mobile application where they provide farmers with information to their smartphones on weather and irrigation and so on, and the backend runs on Eucalyptus. And Puma, as I mentioned, run all their websites on Eucalyptus so that they can shift workload from one mini website to another depending on consumer behavior. And Puma is also a Puppet user, as you may know. So taken together, what we do with Puppet and Eucalyptus and why we have integrated the two products is that you get to a level of scalable cloud automation. We provide the engine that can run the cloud, that can spin up the VMs, handle the workloads, and be the operational part of it. And we need something like Puppet for the configuration and management and administration of that environment, of the infrastructure and of the software. And if you ask me, I think that the role of Puppet will grow because there are increasing numbers of pieces of software that need to be managed and configured, and Puppet is a perfect tool for that. Eucalyptus focuses specifically on being the cloud platform on the very specific task of running the applications, which is a big thing in itself. So we stick to that knitting, and Puppet sticks to the management and configuration. So I mentioned DevOps, which is, of course, a popular buzzword today. But it has an important meaning in the sense that in the old world, we really had a separate world of developers who didn't care much about the system managers, system administrators. And then we had the operations people who didn't necessarily always respect the application guys because the applications guys didn't think about the consequences of what they did. They were just developing fantastic applications, and then they left it over to the operations team to run. And I'm exaggerating here, and of course there are some very well-managed operations where there never have been any issues. But the promise of cloud is that we can bring these two together and talk about DevOps, where those who develop the applications have an awareness of the operation of it, and vice versa, and where responsibility is shared. Because if responsibility isn't shared, you get this blaming thing, and you get mistakes that happen because the one side doesn't know what the other side is doing. And not everybody will necessarily become a DevOps guy, but I believe that the leading organizations and the leading experts will have an understanding of both sides, which of course means that if you, and as you are mostly operations people, you will have to learn new tricks from the development side, and the leading developers, we have to learn a lot of new tricks from you. But I think that is what will drive cloud computing, and that is also what will be the hindrance to cloud computing. So if you go into a large organization with thousands of people who have been trained one way or the other, it will take years to re-educate them and give them the new training they need to manage in a cloud environment where suddenly everything is closer on each other, more integrated, more interdependent. And again, it's a little bit unintuitive because we say that cloud is about abstracting things away. In a cloud, you don't need to worry about the underlying infrastructure. You just have compute power. You have compute cycles and storage and networking, and that's all you need to know. Well, it's sort of true and not true. Because if you are among those who are orchestrating it and in charge of it, you need to now understand the whole chain more than you had to before. So there's more learning that you need to do, and that's why there's this never-ending need to learn new tricks. But those who learn these tricks, they will be the ones operating the most advanced compute installations today. And if you go into an organization like Facebook or some of the others really massive web services today, that's how they operate it. And they don't see much of a difference. They are trying to remove the barriers between the various teams and the various groups. So the goal is just simply to deploy your apps quicker, more efficiently, and safely. But in practice, there are lots of problems in getting there, exactly because people don't necessarily communicate. You know that the biggest problem with communication is the assumption that it has happened, meaning that the operations guys assume that the developers know something, or the developers assume that the operations guys know how to deal with it. But it requires coordination and communication. So it's more difficult than what we would imagine, and that's why I said I think it will slow down the adoption of cloud, but it will also make those who learn it stand out more favorably in the industry. So then let's switch over to the notion of cloud. And many times we get the question of why private cloud is needed and whether it's needed, whether it's just temporary, and will the world ever need any private clouds? I mean, if we have public clouds and all compute power is out there, why would anybody have servers of their own? And many people believe this and act on it. If you take Netflix, one of the biggest users of the internet in the US, they have a clearly stated strategy that they will have no servers of their own. They have some servers and they run some private cloud internally, but their goal is to have nothing, to have everything on an AWS or a comparable public cloud. So you have organizations that act in that way. Then you have the others, like we have government users who say, we love public cloud, but we can never use a public cloud. For compliance reasons, security reasons, tuning and optimizations, performance, economy, whatever it is, we cannot use a public cloud. But we would like the technical benefits. We would like the elasticity, the ease of management, the coordination, the modern technologies that are available there. So that's why there are lots of organizations who need a private cloud. And we see them coming from two directions into this world. It's sort of a bifurcated world, the world of private cloud, where on the one hand side, you have those who learned about cloud in the public cloud. And practically, they learned it at AWS because Amazon is such a dominant player there. So you have the Amazon-influenced world of people who built their first applications on AWS, and then they say, I love this. I would love to have something running here on my own servers. And we have people who run Eucalyptus clouds at home. You can run Eucalyptus on a single laptop. Then you can ask, why would a single laptop be a cloud? Well, if you have a number, you split it into a number of VMs, then you can load balance across them and you can have an elastic environment. It makes more sense with more nodes, but you can't do it on a single laptop. So that's one part of where we are, and that's also where we see a lot of Puppet, because a lot of the users there are Puppet users, and that's part of the reason for the partnership between the two companies. The other side are the people who come from virtualization. So typically, large organizations with data centers, first they had their applications physically provisioned, then at some point they said we must go virtual, and they started virtualizing their environment. And people tell me today that the world's data centers are about 30% virtualized. We meet customers who are up at 70%, meaning that 70% of all their physical servers are running a virtualized environment. And then from there on, the next step is to go cloud. So you physically provisioned, then virtualization, and then cloud. And the way I explained it to my own simple mind to really understand it when I joined Eucalyptus was that virtualization is about splitting the servers into smaller pieces, because today's servers are so powerful that one single physical server has too much power for any given need. So you divide it into 10, 12 pieces through virtualization. But then you need to bring them together so that you can really do the elastic workload management and orchestration across all of those. And that's what you need the cloud platform for. And those of you who know this industry know that there are lots of companies providing or claiming to provide cloud platforms today. So there are some of the big companies do so. VMware, they have their own, and there's a number of startups with their own cloud platforms. There's a number of open source projects who are cloud platforms, so there's a lot of choice for you there. So that's how we see the world coming in. So from the left, it's the Amazon-influenced world. From the right, it practically is the VMware-influenced world. Because in the virtualization space, VMware has a 60 to 70% market share. Then, of course, you can rightly say, and I agree with you, that, hey, Marten, KVM and Xen are open source, so they have a huge installed base which doesn't show up as a market share measured in dollars. And that's true. So VMware doesn't dominate the right-hand world as much as Amazon dominates the left-hand world. That's true, because we have KVM, we have Xen, and then of course we have Hyper-V and other virtualization techniques. But the biggest player on the right is VMware, and its companies are running VMware and saying, I need to go cloud, I need an open alternative, I can't be beholden to one vendor, I don't want to be locked in, I want an environment with many different hypervisors, I want to try out KVM versus Xen, which one is really better? Both are in the Linux kernel today, so they are developing well. Xen is said to be faster, KVM is said to have more backing, which one should I use? With a platform like Eucalyptus, you can abstract that away, so the applications don't know what hypervisors there are, and you can run on all of them or any of them in the same environment. So that's how we get into the private cloud world. And then when you are in the private cloud world, you say, okay, how about hybrid clouds? And absolutely, we believe that if you have a private cloud, you immediately have to be ready for a hybrid cloud. Not that all private clouds will link to another cloud, but they all need to be technically ready for it, and we as vendors have to support it. And the hybrid cloud is some sort of workload that makes use of two different clouds. Initially, when people hear about it, they say, oh, cloud bursting. You run on your own cloud, and when you run out of juice, you burst out to another cloud where you get more power. Sure, that's a very logical and rational way of doing it, but it's not the first hybrid cloud that people typically do. So if we take Plinga, which I mentioned earlier, launching their games on Amazon, bringing them back in when the workload settles, that's a hybrid cloud solution. And it works because Eucalyptus provides absolutely identical APIs. So Eucalyptus has software that acts and looks like AWS, so you can move workloads back and forth. That's a concrete hybrid solution. But there are others. Some people develop in-house on Eucalyptus because then it's internal, they can do whatever they like, they are in control, they have great performance, everything is close to them. But when they launch their game, they're Angry Birds or something, then they do it on a public cloud to get that unlimited scale and unlimited scalability. So there are many hybrid scenarios that you could think of. It could be a private-private hybrid solution. So I think we shouldn't limit our thinking here. It's very early, and we are still switching from virtualization to private cloud. We are switching from only public clouds to private clouds. So we are not there yet fully with lots of hybrid cloud solutions, but that's where we are going. And it will be up to each organization to determine whether they are ready to open up their clouds, whether they have a security reason or compliance reason to not do it. And that's why we'll see all variations in the industry. So I didn't touch upon it yet, but I think it's obvious to all of us that most of what we see in the cloud world is built on open source. So if you go to Amazon and ask what operating system, what hypervisors, what are you using there, most of it is open source. You go into a Facebook, Google, all these big players, Zynga, Twitter, all are running on the LAMP stack and on more open source components that they need. So open source really has taken over the world. I remember in 2001 when I joined MySQL, open source was a cool new thing in the industry. It wasn't a new thing among technical people because open source has existed for a long time. But this was the first time it became publicly known and became something that regular companies would use. But today it's all over the place. We have open source everywhere. And Microsoft is not just using open source, but also producing open source. And Oracle is one of the biggest open source vendors today, and IBM has open source. Everybody has open source. And specifically the cloud vendors, even VMware with all their closed source offerings, now are assembling something called Cloud Foundry with lots of open source components. So that's one victory in itself. The production of cloud, the building blocks of cloud are to a large extent open source. And for every piece you need, there's a great open source alternative. There's an open source operating system, there are open source hypervisors, open source cloud platforms, open source configuration management tools, open source databases, open source big data things, open source data integration, you name it. But the next question is then, if you're really paying attention to openness and freedom, is what's then the output of this? All of these new cloud services, will they also be delivering what they have in an open fashion? Because one of the early thoughts and fundamental principles of free and open source software is this notion of share and share alike. Meaning I share my work output, my source code with you, but I'm also expecting you to share yours with the rest of the world. And not necessarily that I would need it back to me, but I wanted to share it with everybody. But in cloud, it's not clear that this will happen. You will see, and we see today, web services, cloud services that use a lot of open source as they build their offering, but they don't provide a freedom or an openness to their own customers. So to clarify this, I came up with this picture, and this is probably the most complicated slide I have today, so my apologies if it's cryptic, but let me walk you through it, because this helps think through the issue at hand. So you should start from the left and think, okay, you are a user. You're a user of compute power in the world. You can be a company or an individual. So if you're on the first step and all you provide is usage, you are, for instance, a Google user. You go to your browser, you enter a search, and Google provides the answer. So you provide to Google your usage pattern. That's what you contribute, and they give you back an answer. That's software as a service, and all you provided was usage. And for some funny reason, Google makes a ton of money on your usage profile, which is interesting. And now, of course, you see that here you can already ask the question, your usage profile, is that your stuff or their stuff? Who owns it? Who can use it? How are they allowed to combine it? Is it secret or open or closed, or what is it? In the next step, you say, okay, I'm not just providing usage, I'm providing data as well. And Facebook is here an example. I provide Facebook with my usage data because I'm doing all these updates and clicking on like and so on, but I also tell them who my friends are, and I upload my photographs. So I'm giving data to Facebook. And again, you can ask, what's the reciprocity here? What's the openness that we get in return? And again, it's still a software as a service function. On the next step, I have Salesforce, salesforce.com. There you provide usage pattern, you provide data, but you also provide some logic because you are instructing and configuring Salesforce, saying, this is how I treat my leads, this is what I call a prospect, here's a deal I closed. So you give them business logic of your own, which means that, at least philosophically, a service like Salesforce will start understanding what kind of business logic companies are following because they're implementing them on their platform. And then next step, if you provide the whole application, then you are on a platform as a service environment. It could be Google App Engine. I have Cloud Foundry there mentioned, but there are, of course, many. And there you provide all of the stuff on the left, but also your application logic, and you're running it in the cloud. You take one more step and say, no, I'll provide the middleware as well. I'll provide a database and everything, and then you are an AWS user. And if you go really all the way, then you say, no, I'll provide usage, data, logic, application, middleware, and my own hardware. That's the example of a Eucalyptus user, because they provide everything and they run their own cloud. So now, on each of these levels, openness has a different meaning. And many of us grew up, and I certainly grew up, thinking that FOSS, free and open source software, meant that the source code is open. And we love the GPL license because it keeps it open. What we have opened, nobody can close. But in cloud, where you have these degrees of usage, openness gets a different meaning on each of those levels. And it's not just about the code being open. It can be about the API being open or data being open. And we haven't defined those yet. We had Richard Stallman, and we still have him, who, with his friends, defined the GPL license, which set the foundation for the whole thinking of sharing and sharing alike. But we haven't had Richard Stallman's similar people do it for the other layers of the cloud. And it could be that this would be needed, because we otherwise may run into situations where suddenly something isn't open when we assumed it should be. And I happen to believe that openness will be beneficial to everybody. And the example I use is a bank. You deposit your money in the bank, and why do you do it? Well, one reason is because you think it's safer than at home. But another important reason why you do it is you know you can withdraw at any time. And how much do you withdraw? Not much. But you keep it there because you don't have to. You leave the money in the bank because you know you can withdraw it at any time. If suddenly you would get a text message saying that the right to withdraw funds will end in 24 hours, you would go and bring out all your money. So again, a little bit counterintuitively, I believe that it is the lack of lock-in that creates lock-in, creates loyalty. The reason we are loyal customers of the banks, even if they have crappy service, is that we know that the money is safe and we can bring it back if we need to. And I think this will need to be applied to cloud services, where you say, the reason I'm using this service is that if I really need to, I can take my data or my logic or my usage pattern and go away. And because I know I can do it, I practically never will have to. So that's why I would like to see open being more than just the code being open. It's great when code is open. This is why Eucalyptus is open source code. You can modify it, you can redistribute it, you can find all our flaws and our bugs, and I hope you do, because we love to hear from you. You can contribute auto-scaling features and security features, whatever you'd like to contribute. All of that is in the code. But we should take the notion higher and think about what it means in terms of data and APIs. And specifically maybe APIs, which in a cloud environment are becoming increasingly important. And that's why here on my last slide, I'm saying everything will have an API. Meaning you are used to APIs. You are Puppet users and you operate your stuff. You do your stuff with the help of APIs. You write scripts and manifests and templates and whatnot. And it is because you can trust the API and know what it is doing that you can automate the work. And you can go home and the system is running and functioning because you have written those amazing pieces of code that get it done. And I think this notion of API will grow up the stack. We will see APIs for data. We will see APIs for binding software together. We'll see APIs for many different things, and we will make the world scriptable. Scriptable in the broad sense. It doesn't have to be specifically a script, but it's some sort of output of yours that manages it. And even human beings will have APIs. And the example here is Mechanical Turk. Go there, check it out. There is a clearly defined API for human work, human brain work. So APIs will come in all over the place and will allow scalability, elasticity, automation, and will allow us to run big, big systems without them becoming unmanageable. Because in cloud, it's a distributed environment. We are scaling out rather than scaling up. So there isn't really a single point of control, which is great, because we know what single points of control mean. They mean single point of failure. So it's important to keep it distributed and keep build it out horizontally, but by scripting it, by configuring it, by using the APIs, we'll be able to run much bigger environments, and we'll be able to work together with the application developers who don't really necessarily understand this, but to make them understand it so that the DevOps dream can really happen. So with that, I'll stop here. If you're interested in Eucalyptus, there's a panel today at 2 p.m. Our CTO, Rich Wolski, will be on that panel. And if you'd like to follow us, there are some web addresses and Twitter handlers where you find me. So I'll stop here, and then you tell me, hosts, how much time we have for questions and answers and whether we have a microphone. But I'm happy to take questions now. Thank you. There's a question. Right, yes, very good comment. So there's a license called the AGPL, the Affero GPL, which in a very precise way deals with the notion of share and share alike in open source. Because as you may know, the GPL has a reciprocity requirement which says it's open, but when you distribute, it has to be open too. Well, we don't distribute much software anymore because we operate in the cloud. But the AGPL, the Affero GPL license deals with it, and it says if you distribute or if you distribute the output of it, meaning if you're running a web service, you also have to be open. And that is a way of ensuring openness down the chain. Unfortunately, the AGPL hasn't become super popular yet because there are companies who would like to not have to use it because they don't like to open everything they produce. So it's a little bit of battle now between the desire to keep things closed and the desire to mandate openness. But there are some very successful projects and products under the AGPL license. That's right. There's a question.
On the licensing front, there seems to be our experience in Puppet, we just changed licenses, is the more the license requires of the user, the less participation it gets, and thus the less open it ends up being. It'd be interesting to hear your feedback on how your experience in that front, given that you are on that middle ground between the AGPL on one end and the Apache on the other.
Yeah, that's a great question. And sorry, look, I didn't recognize you initially. Yeah, so it's interesting that we have AGPL, GPL, Apache. That's sort of how you can see the range. And the Apache license allows you to do practically anything with the software. You can close source it. And the AGPL is very strict on the share and share alike principle. So which one is best and how do they work? So certainly with MySQL and Linux and many others, it's clear that the GPL was the strongest license and the most popular. It's by far the most popular license. But I agree with you that there's also resistance to it by organizations who wouldn't like to be under such of what I call a blessing, an open source blessing. So it's an interesting battle because I've seen how Apache licensed products tend to become hardware bound. Because hardware vendors love Apache and BSD licensed stuff because it puts no burden on them and they can sell more of their hardware. And GPL licensed software tend to become independent software businesses that sell their products and the software is the business. So which one is then right here? But you're right that it's easy with the Apache license. When you do it, there's no concerns among end users, they just adopt it. There are still organizations who say, we will not use AGPL software. But I don't know of any company who would forbid the use of Apache licensed software. So I don't know what the answer is. I do think that licensing now is less of a contentious issue than it used to be. Meaning that in this world we live in now, there are so many different pieces of software. There's open source all over the place. There are alternatives. If you don't like a GPL licensed product, there's probably an Apache licensed alternative that you can use. And as in cloud, you don't really distribute software, the difference between GPL and Apache is less meaningful, less impactful than it used to be. But I'm studying the question again. You know, back in 2001 and 2 and 3, we studied licensing to become really the masters of it at MySQL, and now I realize I have to re-educate myself because the world behaves differently. And so I guess my short answer is I don't really have a clear answer to you. But that's how I see the world. Yes, where?
Clarification on the difference between your commercial offering and what you call your open source offering. My understanding is that there are actually two different codes.
Right, that was a great question. So the question was, what's the difference between you?
Just to finish my question.
Yeah, sorry.
That caused a lot of confusion in the cloud community.
Yeah.
Because of that, and the understanding that people get involved in this one community, because if you take a product like Puppet or Chef, right, they're pretty sure that most of their stuff that they get involved in the community is going to wind up in which is mostly common, closed source space. And I think it's not clear to a lot of people how that relationship works.
Yeah, excellent question. So the question was, just to repeat it quickly, what's the difference between the Eucalyptus open source product and the commercially supported product? And you're right. Our previous version, Eucalyptus 2, had actually 2 branches of the code because we had features that were only available in the enterprise, in the commercial edition, as we called it. And back in October last year, we made a decision to change that. And this change is happening now as we roll out Eucalyptus 3, which hasn't shipped yet. So I hope we will ship it very, very soon. We are in the final stretches. But when Eucalyptus 3 comes out, we have one single code branch. There's the GPL product. It has 99% of everything. And I can tell you what isn't there. So an example is the hypervisor support. Support for KVM and Zen is open source. Anybody can use it. You don't need us for it. And Wet Paint in Seattle is such a customer, or not a customer because they just use the software. But support for VMware's hypervisor is a paid-for feature. And we think that's fair game. Because if you're using VMware, you've already chosen to pay lots and lots of money for something where you could have used KVM or Zen. So that's the distinction, and that's why they are now commercial plugins, meaning they go on top of the existing installation, on top of the same code base. But everything else is, and there's some SAN integrations that are commercial as well. But the whole platform, the whole cloud platform is open source software, GPL software. And the biggest difference, and I think where we are unique, is in Eucalyptus 3, we are coming out with high availability for the actual cloud platform. So not just high availability for your applications, which you can build or others can build, but of the cloud platform. All of that is open source. We believe this is a first in the industry. We haven't seen anybody else do the feature or anybody else do it in open source. Of course, it means that anybody can now look at it and they can learn from it and they can build their own HA, but that's what we want to happen. That's in the spirit of open source. So it is changing now as we're coming out with 3.0. There are some complications for us that we have now sorted out in terms of licensing compliance. So Eucalyptus has to be very clear on the licensing of the various components we use inside the product. And for instance, for this reason, we now support both Postgres and MySQL as the internal database for managing state. So that has to do with it. So we've done a lot of change there. And admittedly, we didn't have our plan completely in fantastic shape a year ago, but we're an organization that tries to listen and tries to learn. And then we said, let's just go all of this over on the open source side, one set of one code branch, and that's what we're now working on. We just hired a new community manager, and we will be much more active in working with contributors and that side, which granted, we haven't done a fantastic job at so far, but we are learning and fixing as we go. So was this answer to your question? Excellent. Great. And I think we're running out of time. Okay, thank you guys.